I've just viewed this clip by Joseph Cohen on Israel Advocacy Movement, a 9-minute clip of his appearance on House of Comments, which is the channel of Ralph Masilimani, who has hidden me from his chat. Now, I often wonder what he thinks he's doing, and he does say that he's there to help white people, and I guess I'm kind of saying the same thing. I am, however, giving it to white people with both barrels about what I think is wrong with them. Well, Ralph is basically just pandering to them. There are some who suspect Ralph's motives, saying that he might be just harvesting their data or whatever. I don't know myself what he thinks he's doing, but it occurred to me that all he does is often to give opportunities for them to disgrace themselves through the stupid, pathetic things that they say in their charmless, lower-class manner. It's a kind of parade of horrors, really, of why you might hate these people and feel contempt for them, their class, their fizzing hatred of Jews and everyone else, and just really shuddering at the thought of supporting them. And this is actually mentioned in, I think, minute 4 of that video by Joseph Cohen called Jew Schools, the Far Right. He basically says that in minute 4 that the far right are consumed by hatred. And I would add that they are disgraced by their stupidity and charmlessness. But what do you expect of peasants anyway? Or, lumpen proletariat. They have no religion, they have no representatives, they have no codes of conduct. They are really motivated by their desire to triumph over the others, even if they're on the same side. We know of how easily and casually they betray each other. Just for the fun of it. It seems as if what they do is how shall I put it? They will abuse their power. If you give them any power, they will abuse it. And I've seen many instances of that. And if you say, well, you didn't have to do that, did you? And the response seems to be that, well, what little power I had, for example, with their wrench of their moderators in somebody's channel, is that, well, I don't expect to hold this position for long. So while I am still mod of this live stream, I'm going to use it to hide my opponents. And even if they did nothing wrong, and even if nobody said anything wrong, I mean, they might just use whatever power they have just to exercise it before it's gone. So short-termism is basically a particular trait of the lumpen proletariat, and then the language with which they use to describe others is, well, unattractive and not likely to increase understanding and respect. But this is how they behave. And while we could say exactly the same thing of the Western political establishment, at least the members of the Western political establishment have a modicum of education, some idea of how to behave, and they do not completely disgrace themselves as those who one would classify as the lumpen proletariat. What about those who are not completely damned by their low status, low education, low information background? Well, not everyone in the right is uneducated. Some of them went to a good university. But their utter charmlessness is almost uniform, really. I suppose those who have anything to lose will not dare to give their real name. And so this is the disadvantage that they have in relation to the perception of them. And this is something that Joseph Cohen recognizes. Jews have rules of behavior and rules of speech, and even if most of them are not aware of them, certainly not the secular ones, the ones who try to remember what exists of their religious principles will have some inhibiting knowledge of these principles, will have some inhibiting effect on their speech and conduct, just because they know that there are certain rules and it would look better for them if they didn't break those rules. And I've said before that Jews are the aristocracy of humanity, and I say that because, well, they have more rules than we do. And even if they don't obey them, they are in some way aware of them and try to abide by them, or try to appear to be abiding by them. And even this effort makes them look a little better than members of the lumpen proletariat who are apparently without hope or charm. And even if they did have a certain charm, the political baggage of what they want is against them. They are considered to be racists and Nazis, and perhaps when they are accused of being those things, they become those things. Most of them do not have the education to dance around with words in the way the upper middle class liberals do. They don't have the social instincts of appearing to fit into the mainstream. And many of them think any opportunity to be heard must be used up to the fullest possible extent, and that's why you get people who appear on other streams, and their favourite act of vandalism is to uh, pawn bomb the stream, or say the forbidden N word, and that would be their idea of fun. Well, I understand why some of them would be saying, well, let's kick them all out. Why can't we say that? Never liked those Jews. Why can't we say that? There's a certain lack of self-awareness, I suppose, that perhaps only the people in the classes above them can understand. That, or perhaps they don't understand it. I mean, they have been schooled into certain kinds of behaviour that makes them above the ones from the classes below, and that is enough. And certain traits of behaviour would be, well, a kind of circumspection about things one says. And of course, we know that it's the people at the bottom who are most affected by immigration, and we cannot expect them to have the social graces of the political establishment, and they make themselves easy to mock and sneer at because they are, well, a little dim, have bad grammar, don't know how to present themselves, and are full of hate and bitterness at their lowly position in life. Or if they have not begun in a lowly position, they become used to being abused, and they feel themselves to be victims. And if they don't want to blame their government, then inevitably they blame the Jews. And they can't help but fixate upon a certain form of argumentation that they think is morally viable. And it is that of the presupposition. And this is linked to also to the burden of proof. I'm sure they don't really, think about it in those terms, but the presupposition is for example, this is how they would think. We are people who hate Jews. It is obvious that they are responsible for all our ills. Look at them. They are members of the liberal elite. Look at the liberal elite as oppressing us. Look at the liberal elite protecting the Jews. It is the Jew who is either beneficiary or the puppeteer of the British political establishment. And this is actually quite hard to disprove. Because one could say, oh, but it's not just, they're not all Jews. But then they can say, well, look at the privileges they have. They must have cheated to get those privileges. Oh, the Holocaust. They bigged up the numbers and they somehow got the Gentile to pass Holocaust denial laws so that it cannot be questioned. And therefore, they must have cheated. They must be the puppeteer. And you can't prove us wrong. Because for any disgraceful act of liberalism, there will be somebody who is Jewish that can be found to say that such and such a person did this or that thing and must be controlling events and instigating certain forms of behavior. And it is really this presupposition. And this presupposition puts the burden of proof on the person wishing to deny that it is the Jews that caused it. You can, well, I talk about, well, you have to give an alternative theory, don't you? You have to say, well, it's not the Jews, it's this other thing. It is the British government. They want this narrative. And they, Jews and Gentiles, are both really at the mercy of the law as it stands and current and historical events. I suppose the whole thing hinges on the fact that Jews have privileges. They are apparently indestructible. They seem to win. I imagine a lot of Jews don't feel they have won in particular. They might think they're still hated and not all Jews are wealthy. But that is not the perception of the Gentile who is envy of their status. And so in these things I prefer neutrality rather than having a certain assumption of things. It is very hard to prove a negative anyway. It's impossible to prove without an alibi that you didn't murder so-and-so or commit some crime you were accused of unless you have an alibi. And if people are determined to think ill of you, then it is very difficult. And obviously, if the government is going to give you legislation to protect your feelings from being offended, if you were unwise, you would grab it with both hands. The peculiar problem about the far right is that they don't have a religion. And this makes it hard for them to behave properly to each other, let alone outsiders whom they clearly despise. And so it was easy for Joseph Cohen in that stream to appear effortlessly superior to the bitter, angry Christians who clearly resented him. And these bitter, angry Christians have a peculiar religion that is very hard to defend because of the absurdity that it proclaims. And this is at heart the problem of Western man, that he doesn't have a religion, and those who believe in the old religion are required to defend an absurdity which they cannot defend without laws forbidding blasphemy, and they have all been repealed by liberal governments. In any case, those who hate Jews and Muslims are overwhelmingly atheists who don't understand the utility of religion, of what this abstract concept of being a system of morality confers on your group, how it dignifies your group and protects it with its rules. So what is called the far right will never win because they hate themselves, because they have the most absurd religion that they cannot morally and intellectually defend, and so they abandon it. And if you have no religion, or have no system of rules that you consistently follow, you only have your opinions and your feelings and your moods and your emotions to rely on. And these are changeable and as capricious as the weather. And because these people are unskilled manual labour, their government and big business would rather not have to deal with them. They are not attractive employees, and so they prefer cheap immigrant labour. And government legislation is all about protecting their investment of cheap immigrant labour that they've invited into their country. As for the indigenous, low status, low information, low education people, they are really surplus to requirements. And so they can only get increasingly angry and resentful of the world in which is becoming increasingly antagonistic towards them. It's easy to hate people that you think are stupid and hateful and look as if they deserve any misfortune that befalls them, and besides, they are only clients of the welfare state. I want to say something about standards of behaviour, which I'm sure nobody really grasps these days. People will do whatever they think they can get away with. And in terms of speech, you wouldn't expect the lumpen proletariat to practice. Well, they wouldn't practice the discretion of the diplomat or the courtier or the politician. They will say whatever comes into their heads. And of course, they will use words as weapons, as many of us do, but some with more restraint than others. women in particular use words to injure each other and pull each other down, usually about their appearance. And I think in the olden days it would be their morals. If women would police each other's behaviour and ostracize any of them who are guilty of extramarital sex. And so the difference would be, I think, whether you take up what right you think you are given, or you only take up what there is that you think you need for your purposes. I know often we think, well, it's for free, let's take it. I think we've all been guilty of that. So you think, well, I have the right to say mean things about you, then you do say mean things about others, and often you get yourself into trouble. Not necessarily with the law. You hurt people's feelings. Family members might never speak to you again because of something you said. This does often happen. I wonder how many people know about family disputes these days. I know, if family is almost a thing of the past, then, well, we wouldn't be having family disputes because we don't really interact with them. But for people who do have family and who have family disputes, or who have people on the peripheries observing their family disputes, it seems to be that a lot of pain can be caused by people who are supposed to care about each other, but who nevertheless cannot resolve these issues without family therapy. In fact, I actually know somebody on YouTube who mentioned this new thing. And recently I noticed, well, I heard of somebody else's, somebody's family, or somebody's family dispute. And it struck me about how easily we can unintentionally cause pain to others and ourselves. And when we compound the potential for causing pain by doing it recklessly and deliberately, well, we cause more pain. That is more than the unintentional pain that we cause ourselves and to our loved ones. And often I don't think we are even aware of it. So, the subject I was talking about was, I think, to do with always pushing something to the fullest possible extent, or having the discretion to hold back. I'm not saying that I am the one who always knows about these things. I know I've made many mistakes in the past myself. It's only when you go too far that you know exactly how far you can go. And some of us have difficulty restraining ourselves when there's something um, that we very much want. And so discretion must be the watchword of those of us who want to be considered trustworthy, wise, or all the uh, leadership qualities that leaders ought to have. I was talking earlier about the subject of malice, and obviously, to be malicious is well not a good thing to be, and obviously to be the victim of malice is not a good thing to be. Do we have the right to feel malice towards the people that we've always disliked? There is this question of thought crime. Um, nobody, nobody can be convicted of malice. Well, actually, you can. I mean, a murder used to be described as the intentional killing of somebody with malice aforethought. So that would compound the crime of homicide. I mean, obviously, if you killed someone unintentionally, it's only manslaughter, but if you did it with malice aforethought, it is murder and attracts a more serious penalty. And I suppose that cannot be challenged as being unfair, because if you really intended to cause damage, cause harm, cause personal injury, then you should be punished more than somebody who you only did it unintentionally. And sadly, there's a lot of malice in existence because of all the unfair laws that we have in existence. And those who are short termists, the atheists who cannot restrain themselves from using any power they have, they will become even more short termist as things get worse. After all, the power to hurt people through words is well, I suppose, satisfying for those who like to do these things. And if you think in terms of there not being an afterlife, then obviously you must indulge yourself as much as possible to hurt those you dislike because it gives you pleasure. The Germans have a word for it, don't they? Schadenfreude. It is gratifying to see the consequence of the power of your words to hurt and humiliate and frustrate and aggravate. And without an ethical religion to restrain these impulses, then I fear that life will become more brutish and nasty and corrupt and malicious. And as for ways of avoiding and correcting this tendency, should we be optimistic? Well, we should always try, but if the culture is that of malice, spite, and self indulgence, then it will be a difficult tide to stem. Because short-termism is about indulging in, well, any little passing pleasure because we fear that tomorrow may not come for us. And so we have to take our pleasures as they come. And a lot of it is really the hurting and humiliation of other people simply because we are in a position to hurt and humiliate people, perhaps in a way that petty officials like to do with people who need to deal with officialdom. You can send them here and there and make them fill out the form again. I suppose for many people it will be quite satisfying. So I'm afraid I I can't be optimistic about that. Because the laws are wrong and show no signs of being corrected in the immediate future. And nothing is fit for purpose. People just do their own thing and ignore the efforts of others. They can't cooperate. Because they hate even others of their own group. John Williams says, us heathens have no rules. Yes, I am a savage. Yes, Tiff. People need someone to blame when they can't look inward, when I suppose their pride prevents them from acknowledging any responsibility. Many people are. Many people, understandably, do not want to acknowledge that they might have been wrong. Because it's painful, isn't it? It's easier to blame somebody else. Look what you made me do. Look what you made me do to myself. Why didn't you stop me from doing that stupid thing? And so on. Many people blame their parents. It's about personal responsibility. But one of the more interesting aspects of Judaism is their annual uh, annual day of compulsory contemplation of their mistakes of the year on Yom Kippur. And I think, one of the things that is difficult to decide about the Jews is, do they really have God's protection, or do they just have a religion that protects them from self-destruction more than other religions? And I've always thought that Yom Kippur, this compulsory day of revising all, the promises one has made of ritually asking for forgiveness is, even if people don't do it sincerely, does put in mind what we ought to do from time to time and learn from our mistakes, or at least acknowledge them, or ask forgiveness for them. And that compared with Christmas and Easter, it's almost beyond compare, really. Eating Easter eggs, eating chocolate eggs, um, it seems almost a wasted opportunity. And then drinking too much, eating too much at Christmas, spending money we don't have on things we don't even need or want, or buying presents for people who will only return them on Boxing Day. It seems an unwarrantable indulgence that is only supported by mindless consumerism, of course. Shouldn't we have more self-improving traditions? And Halloween, that has come and gone. Why do the British celebrate it? It's because they don't even have a culture. All these British proles, they don't want to be British. They want to be American because of the American TV that they keep watching and seeing how Americans are wealthier than they are. They want to be American, and American culture includes Halloween. So instead of commemorating our dead, as we ought to do, we have children going around demanding sweets. And perhaps committing acts of criminal damage when they don't get them. Obviously, this is these pumpkins and costumes and special Halloween cakes and things would be eagerly sold by supermarkets and shops. So if you don't have a proper religion, then we won't have a proper marriage, we won't have a proper family, we won't have any proper traditions to pass on to our legitimate children, even if we had any. We will just be subject to the prevailing culture, which will be that of the lowest common denominator, which is basically football and shopping and sex and drugs. And this is basically the foundation of Western civilization as it is now. If Jews are corrupt, living in this moral environment, who can be surprised? Yet Jews are blamed for the consequences of liberalism. This seems to me obviously unfair. But I think Jews are being blamed for surviving better in the moral sewage than Gentiles do. And envy inevitably leads to hatred. And yet again is this other concept of Judaism, the idea of the ayin hara, the evil eye. I did talk about it briefly in one of my recent streams. And there are Jewish rules for avoiding the evil eye, the ayin hara. So Jews are supposed to watch themselves, not be boastful, not to boast of things that one might be envied for. The success of our children, our wonderful holidays, and first-class travel and home improvements and expensive dinners and all that. If we are wealthy and if we enjoy these things, we would try to be discreet about how much we have enjoyed these things, but we are encouraged by social media to post photographs of our wonderful holidays and the delicious meals we have had. And this even provokes the lumpen proletariat to photograph their enormous platefuls of unappetizing food so that they are mocked. I have no doubt which is the superior religion, in fact, the mother of the other Abrahamic faiths. Obviously, they are expected to adhere to a higher standard, and even if most of them do not, the idea of these higher standards must somehow be floating around in their minds that would act as an inhibitor in what they might otherwise say or do. And really, the whole idea of the ayin hara is to avoid provoking the malice of those who have less than they. But I know there are people who want to be envied. They want arm candy. They want to craft their Facebook profiles with wonderful photographs of their beautiful female companions in exotic holiday destinations. That would be the perfect way of provoking envy and hatred. And the malice of others. Tiffany says we do a lot of stating based as opinions without factual basis and demand others for proof to discredit these opinions. I think a lot of what people say online is as significant as birdsong and less musical. You hear these intellectuals talk about something that you know has no relevance to modern life, to anyone's life, but it's just a show of how long they can talk nonsense and apparently impress people and elicit a response from another intellectual narcissist. I suppose I should see it as an opportunity to stand about these people. Born again, Harappan asks, why aren't I in an Islamic country yet? Well, I'm a political activist and I am here to talk about solving problems. It's not about me escaping to a better place because that's not actually my intention. It depends on what you want to do. I mean, yes, it would be nice in theory to, go and live in a nicer country, but what I really want to do is to solve problems. I know that a lot of people don't think it can be solved. But I think there must be, in theory anyway, a way. And it's easy for me to say what I think is the solution. And it's not that easy for people who object to my solution to come up with anything better. So, born again Harappan is saying, I have no right to criticize the West. That would be silly, wouldn't it? You are accepting your subject status and say, by accepting this, I'm so grateful to be in the West, I must never criticize it. I'm not of that mindset. I'm not going to be uncritical of the West. I think what I say is valid. It's true. They can't deny it. There is something wrong. Are you saying I can't point out what I think is a problem because of my, what? I guess, status, because I wasn't born here? I don't accept that. There is no formal rule saying that I must never criticize the government. Stephen James complains about Ralph. Well, the thing is, it's actually quite difficult to talk about politics. I've somebody who's it's difficult to talk about politics anyway because somebody's going to blame, or they're going to blame, your right to say anything about anything, whether you're indigenous or foreign. I mean, they will, for perverse reasons of their own, they will want to undermine you. For their own egotistical reasons. It's like, you have no right to say this or that because you've been guilty of this or that or, whatever. But what I do really is talk about, well, things that would be true even if I never existed. So people who wish to undermine what I say by attacking my character, well, attack away. But, even if I didn't exist, all the problems that I pointed out would still exist. Now, what does Ralph think he's doing? We don't really know. It's possible that he doesn't know it himself. Maybe he just enjoys, well, the sheer number of people who come and, listen to his streams. He knows that he commands a certain following because he he has a list of topics that he does discuss, and these are of interest to people of a certain group, and therefore of interest to the people who oppose these groups. So his dreams would attract a combination of nationalists who have a problem with Jews and Muslims and non-whites, and a few token Jews, Muslims, Christians to keep the pot stirred with the anger and resentment of those who feel victims of government policy, but he offers no solution. He can only pander to them but I suppose he is accepting his position as non-white person who is Christian. I'm not Christian. I see it as a religion that has failed, and obviously it's going to be difficult coming to terms with the failure of Christianity and liberalism. It's a bit of a double whammy. But if Ralph can't talk about it, then I mustn't I? The corruption of the Vatican. Well, priesthoods are corrupt. The Jews themselves suffered from the corruption of the Sadducees, didn't they? I was told about how divided society was in the time of Jesus when I think I'm excuse me a moment, I think I have to go and blow my nose. Sorry about this. Yes, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So the Sadducees were equated with the liberal elite, and the Pharisees were equated with UKIP and Trump supporters. So it's interesting, isn't it, that people of the same race and religion can also be divided, and so divided that you fight each other so much that you ask the Romans to adjudicate in your dispute, and then they take over and eventually kick you out, which is basically what happened to the Jews in ancient Israel. And we mustn't forget that the Romans, it was really the Roman Empire that picked up the religion of Christianity and ran with it. I don't know if you've read Caesar's Messiah. There's a documentary about it, basically saying that it was the Roman propaganda department who probably compiled the New Testament, and that it was a work of literature and not revealed scripture because of the provenance of the different books of the New Testament. It's an interesting theory. We already know that the New Testament was written, I don't know, 50 years after the death of Jesus. But if Christianity were created by the Roman propaganda department, then well, it looks like all those centuries, well, 2 millennia really, you could have not been believing in anything that was based on logic or truth. And this leads me to compare Confucian principles with Christianity. Confucius lived and died 500 years before the year of the Lord. So it does look like Confucian principles have outlasted Christian principles. I mean, I don't know whether the Chinese, in fact, follow Confucian principles. I suppose most of them would be, aware of what he said, and the usual things he said about behaving well and honourably, etc. So I suppose if Confucius is worshipped, I mean, well, they're communists now, so and atheists, so. But anyway, they have this kind of figure that is supposed to have said all those things, and none of and Confucius doesn't promise a heaven. But unfortunately, a lot of the things that he proposes about behavior between elder brother and younger brother, well, this is impossible to do if you're an only child. And then the other thing is the relationship between man and wife, and obviously impossible to do if you have no wife and no prospect of having one, because in China they're significantly more men than there are women as a consequence of the practice of female infanticide. And this is another thing that is interesting, that although obviously, if you want a patriarchy, you want a son, and you don't want daughters whom you only bring up and who go away. And so I suppose the temptation is to cheat and just have sons if you can only have one child. But then the consequence of that is that women become more valuable and a scarcer commodity. So that is the consequence of trying to cheat in the game of demographics. And female infanticide is forbidden in the Quran. You could easily make an argument, well, I do anyway, that you can attribute any failure of the West to not following some Islamic principle or other. And that is very easy to do. The actual Muslims don't seem to be able to make these arguments. I'm not aware of any of them who do. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that if everything were working properly, if everything were fit for purpose, we well, we wouldn't have we wouldn't have the problem to begin with. But because it's all wrong, it will continue to be all wrong. Vatican has no power. Well, it has some kind of influence. It enrages Michael Boris, a traditional Catholic. And if it has no other purpose than to be parasitic, you know, that church property is being consumed by parasitic pedo priests, then there is a moral vacuum. And this is part of the problem. So, born again Harriman, what's your moral system? What are you going to choose to be your moral system? Oh, thank you, Stephen James. I'm always grateful when you say nice things about me. Why don't I leave the West? I might leave it. The option remains. But I feel I have to, try and do what I started doing. Obviously, there has to be limits. I really just want to be able to say that I tried to deliver my message, and but I couldn't. There was nobody in, even though the lights were on. That kind of thing. And I just would like somebody to say, well, having read your proposals, they can't be implemented because they're stupid, and they're stupid because A, B, C, D, etc. And then that would be nice. Not this constant apparent incomprehension about what I'm trying to say. And then also saying that you're right, but you're wrong, kind of thing. A dialogue would be nice. And really, I think I am disliked because I am right. Do national secular Arabs want what I am promoting? Well, that's very nice to know. Hi, bye. I'm so grateful to Tiv Tiv, who says such nice things. Thank you for coming, Tiv Tiv. Thank you for that compliment, born again Harapan. Yeah, I'm sorry to keep saying the same thing again and again. I mean, it'd be nice to have somebody to argue with. And thank you for complaining about having to hear the same old shit and coming back again and again to have it. All right. What is the answer if not Islam? Born again Harappan. Tiv says, do not judge, or you too will be judged, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. We can't stop ourselves, can we? Recklessly we judge others, and in turn we are judged. We live in glass houses, but we can't resist throwing stones at others. We love the sound of breaking glass. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. How are we supposed to handle shame? And is there a difference between shame and guilt? That's interesting. I, I don't know if Tiff Tiff has anything to share with us. I don't know if you want to come and join us. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear your views about child development. Oh, I'll put the link in. I'm sorry if I've been a little slow getting to this point when I put a link in my stream. But if you're around to give us a talk about what to do about shame, how to deal with shame for children. Was I made to feel ashamed? I'm sure I was. Am I a sociopath? I don't think so. I don't know. Lots of chat for me to comments in the chat for me to go through. I think we ought to feel shame if we've done something shameful. I don't think there's anything wrong about that. Do they even try and come up with a better plan? I don't think so. I think they want the world to end or their lives to end, and that's the end of it. That's as much as they hope for or want. Now me, I'm glad you mentioned this thing about the 100 lashes, and I'm saying it's not going to be, this punishment is not going to be meted out retrospectively. In fact, there is a way of acquiring status, even though one might be an unmarried mother, by being the first to repent. So I was thinking of incentivizing people to, it's like, okay, I might have 10 illegitimate offspring by 10 different fathers, but I repent, and then there'll be a list under secular Quranism, for me to go on to say, well, I'm the first to repent, even though I am this sort of terrible, unmarried mother with 10 variously fathered illegitimate offspring, and it's like, this is how you get to correct yourself and redeem yourself. It's not all about shaming people forever. There will be lists for people to acquire status, so it doesn't look completely hopeless if you have all these illegitimate offspring before you ever realize that this was something you shouldn't have done, and it's something your government should have discouraged from the beginning, but it didn't because it was so corrupt and incompetent. I'm not going to, or it would be against the rules of natural justice to punish anyone for doing something that wasn't a crime when they did it. But I can't pretend that sexual morality is not one of the reasons that brought on the decline of the West. So I have to make this point. I'm sorry if it upsets so many people, but my intention is not to be harsh. Tehran, hi, hey. You said something about doing a stream this weekend, did you? Oh, great. Tiff says she'll join me in about 5 minutes. Great. Can you hear the fireworks? There's nothing on at the moment, but you probably can. Well, I can hear some fireworks. So I'll keep talking for the next 5 minutes while we wait for Tiff to come. Excuse me. Born again Harapan says Islam is false. How do you know? What less false religion have you?
Good morning.
Hi.
Or good afternoon. Or yeah, it's still kind of morning where you're at. How's it going?
Okay. Maybe I've been talking too long. Thanks for
Sound a little
coming.
hoarse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So how have you been?
Good. I've been working this morning, so I'm still kind of in my work zone. I've been working and listening and everything. But yeah, shame is an interesting it's an interesting result, I believe, of early development, the inability to process shame and the sociopathy that I think develops from that in children. And I've done a lot of reading on this because my ex is very sociopathic, very textbook. And so, what I've read and learned is that in a child's development around ages anywhere from about 18 months to about 3, when you have your baby and you're raising them, they spend their first portion of their lives being told everything's good, being applauded about everything, being encouraged. Then they hit that age where they're walking a little bit, they can get into things, and they hear the word no for the first time. For the first time, something that they do is no longer this great accomplishment. They're scolded. And they say that it's during that phase of development that if you don't properly guide your child through the process of experiencing that shame and hearing the word no, and understanding it, that it's okay, or if it's the polar end of the opposite end of that spectrum, if the child is never told no, that can be the starting point of a sociopathic type personality later on in adulthood. um, it's that creates that need, that necessity to ignore shame or run from it or hide from it, lack of accountability and all of that. And it's interesting because with my ex, he had a report card in his box of old files from kindergarten, and the comments from his teacher were very supportive of this. Wasn't accountable for things he'd done in the class with his friends, wasn't, it all kind of supported this theory, that I'd read through in these different white papers and stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of people have a hard time processing shame, admitting when they're wrong, being accountable.
I had a
Personal growth.
terrible report. I have, my teachers really hated me. So I guess I mean, I think they used the English language to tell me what a terrible person I was. But that was in my teens. But tell me again what it was um, that your ex's report card said about him. That you said supporting the bad behavior. Is that what you meant?
It supported the fact that early on in childhood he exhibited signs of future sociopathy, with his behavior. So there was a lot of things that he was doing at 5 years old that would be, that would correlate to how he later on in life as an adult had very sociopathic tendencies in his behavior and the way he navigated through life and everything. It was her comments
Do you
for a
mean
long
lying, that sort of thing?
lying, a lack of accountability, a lack of empathy, not having the ability to gauge social cues from other students. And it's interesting because he was the oldest of 9 kids, and he was the only one with a different dad. His mom had him very young. And so I think being the result of a young, being born to a young mother, having that relationship not work out, I think he was probably overcompensated a lot as a young child because his grandparents raised him. So I think during that critical time in development, he was not told no a lot of the time. When he did wrong, he wasn't scolded and the important thing is, it's not just to tell a child no when they're wrong, but it's to nurture them afterwards, to make them
To
feel,
reason with them,
to
isn't it?
reason with them, to explain to them, and to make them feel safe even though they're being scolded. You tell them no, but you explain why, and then you hug them. It's really simple stuff, but a lot of people don't do that anymore. And I think that's why we have such problems with accountability mostly.
Yes. I think with parents, I suppose, you could just smack your kid every time it did something you didn't like, and then
Yeah, I mean,
it would be, yes, like it. Well, I think even with dogs, they also respond to affection, and if they love you, then they'll try to do the right thing for you. And I think
yes.
this is what Confucius was trying to say about laws, saying you can put all kinds of laws to keep the people under control, but if you
Mhm.
are a bad leader, they'll just avoid all the laws and evade them, and try to go around them. But if they think you're a good leader and they love you, they'll instinctively just want to please you.
Yeah, we do. We have that instinctual need to people please. I mean, I'm definitely that way. I have a little Pomeranian who's very naughty. Teddy, he's not very obedient, but he does have a need to make me happy, to make sure I'm safe and everything. And I've learned early on with him that positive reinforcement works. the negative reinforcement didn't work with him. It's the positive, the pets and the cuddles and things like that. And people are the same way. It's and I think a big part of this, Claire, is it kind of relates to what you believe would be improvements for our society, and that is having a two-parent home, having a solid family structure. You know,
Yes, yes, because then I think whether we're male or female, we need this idea of what a man is supposed to be like, what a woman is
hmm
supposed to be like, and there's also a kind of appeal system. So as a child, you try one parent, can I do this, and then they say no, and you go to the other parent, and you kind of work out which parent to go for what thing you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
do, that sort of thing.
yeah. You have
And
the good cop, bad cop, but I think it's important too, and having that support and that full complete unit when the child's going through different phases of the development too, with the boy, the girl, whatever the case may be. It's very critical to have somebody present, and that's why you have two parents. That's why we can't just have children self-impregnate and have babies. We are made to have a two-parent home, two people raising the child. So we've kind of lost a lot of that, I think, in our child development now and our child raising. And also we've lost, out here at least, we've lost a lot of the community. When I was a kid, the kids would all play outside, and if somebody did something wrong, it would be somebody would see. There would be some parent out there watching that would report back to the other parent. Now people kind of just keep to themselves. They mind their own business. They don't want to get involved. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that we've lost the village to raise the child, as along with the two parent home. Um,
yes, and when you see children and they're misbehaving, a lot of adults don't want to get involved because they might, be afraid, or
yeah.
or have an unpleasant experience of being sworn at, or
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Or they're afraid of being sued. Everybody out here sues everyone. Everybody's litigation happy. They all want to.
Mm.
They all want to jump in the courtroom and try and get settlements. It's really hilarious. We have people out here who are suing McDonald's because their hot coffee spilt in their lap and burnt them. It's
Wow.
McDonald's fault. That's the mentality of Americans, it seems like. So yeah, it's complicated, but I think at the end of the day, when it comes to improvement, the easiest thing we can do is just raise good people, put the effort and the time into your children, at
Mm.
the very least.
Mhm.
At the
But,
very
but what you
least.
said, yes, yes. I mean, what you said about McDonald's, makes you think that there are too many lawyers. They become ambulance chasers. They encourage people to be litigious, saying, "Well, no win, no fee. You won't lose anything. Maybe if you just let me go after, that person that you think wronged you, and
hmm
and we'll share the proceeds." And I think in more actively managed, governed countries, they'll say, we don't want too many lawyers. Too bad if you want to be a lawyer, why don't you become an engineer, or do something useful with your life rather
hmm
than become a lawyer? Because actually, lawyers are cheap to train, because you have a
Yes.
legal library, you have a photocopier, it's just moving paper around. Well,
Yeah, I agree. And I think another part of it too is the fact that corporations are so quick to settle. So a lot of these people will go into these lawsuits not expecting to get their, what they claim as their damages. They'll go in just hoping for a settlement, because a lot of the times the cost to defend yourself in these types of civil suits or workers' comp or whatever, it's so expensive for the company. It's easier just to settle, so here's 25 grand, go away. Here's 15 grand, go away. I know that happens a lot in the workers' comp type claims that people will put on employers if they slip and fall at work, or they claim they, twist their ankle or whatever. It's just
mhm.
easier for them to settle with these employees. Hold on one second for me, Claire. I'm getting a phone call real fast.
Sorry, I was dealing with something else too. Where was I?
Sorry about that. Claire, I'm gonna have to get going. I only had a couple minutes. I need to get back to my. I trade crypto.
Oh,
I wouldn't say I day trade it, but I try and catch the peaks. And
right.
I'm in the midst of a very hot zone right now with some money, so I need to get back focused on that. But thank you
All
for
right.
having me on. It's nice seeing you.
Thank you. Thank you. You must tell me about a bit more about that when you have time. Thank you,
I
Tiffany.
will. I will. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.
All right. I think I've finished this chat. I'll leave it now. Thank you all for listening. Wasn't it great having Tiffany? Yeah. Let me just see if Domingo is available to come on. Maybe not. I'll just wait a few minutes in case he does want to come on. He's watching the trial, so I'll let him do that, and I'll ask if he wants to come on or watch the trial. Tell us about it. Okay. He wants to carry on watching the trial, so we'll speak to you another time, Domingo. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for coming by.